All right, today we're going to dive deep into the 2024 U.S. presidential election, one of the most historic and, let's be honest, tumultuous races we've ever seen. And to guide us through it all, we'll be using the incredible reporting from the best-selling book, 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America.
And this quote right here from an interview Trump gave for the book, it just perfectly sets the stage, doesn't it? It's all about this central theme we're going to explore, a truly stunning political comeback against what pretty much everyone thought were impossible odds.
So, let's start with the bottom line. The final result, a decisive 312 to 226 victory in the Electoral College. But these numbers only tell us what happened, not how it happened. So how did we get here?
And that, right there, is the core question we're tackling today. How in the world did Donald Trump, the first former U.S. president to become a convicted felon, actually regain the White House? And, just as important, how did the Democrats lose their grip on the country? Let's dig in.
Okay, so to really understand the comeback, we've actually got to start with the incumbents campaign first. The book 2024 really paints this picture of a campaign that was dealing with these hidden cracks long before the race ever really heated up. Just look at this. One word. Sleepwalking. That's it. It's how reviewers and the authors of the book describe the state of President Biden's re-election effort at the very beginning. Just sleepwalking into it. And this quote from the book, it really gets to the heart of the problem. The campaign didn't kick off with some big, clear strategy. It was more like inertia, a decision that was made by not making a decision, which meant a lot of tough questions just weren't being asked. And you can imagine that kind of inertia. It created this whole climate of anxiety behind the scenes. According to the book, staffers were actually afraid to question the president's decision because they didn't want to seem disloyal. Even former President Obama could only gently warn about Trump's surprising political strength. Polls that showed Trump ahead were often just brushed aside. And get this, offers of help from some really experienced political pros were just ignored. So with all this anxiety bubbling up and the polls not looking great, the campaign started to get, desperate for some kind of reset. By April 2024, top advisors came up with this memo pushing for a huge gamble. Get Biden on a debate stage with Trump and do it as early as possible. And that gamble? It led right to the moment everything changed. A single night that completely rewrote the entire election. And wow, does this capture the miscalculation? The goal, according to that internal memo, was for Biden to stand right next to Trump and show strong leadership versus Trump's weakness and chaos. But the outcome? It was a disaster, a performance that did the exact opposite and just poured fuel on the very fire it was supposed to put out. And after that debate, all those private worries we talked about, they just exploded into the open. This op-ed from George Clooney was a massive turning point. It was a signal that even major Democrats were now willing to publicly call for a change. His point was simple and, honestly, pretty brutal. You just can't win the fight against time. The pressure just became overwhelming. And on July 21st, Joe Biden did something no eligible incumbent had done in over 50 years. He dropped out of the presidential race. And that set off a political scramble unlike anything we've seen in modern history. So, what happens now? The Democratic Party turned to Vice President Kamala Harris, who was suddenly thrown into what a lot of people were calling an impossible campaign. Just how impossible was it? Look at this. 107. That's it. That's how many days she had to launch a presidential campaign from basically zero, introduce yourself to the American people on her own terms, and fight a political machine that had been running for years. 107 days. Her main problem really came down to this classic political trap, the incumbent's shadow. Think about it. How do you create your own identity when you're completely tied to the president you're replacing, especially when his low poll numbers are the whole reason you're running in the first place? And according to the reporting in 2024, that shadow was long. Harris inherited all the administration's baggage and poll numbers. Her campaign was bogged down by slow decision-making, and in a really fascinating detail from the book, she would even get calls from Biden reminding her to stay loyal, which made it that much harder to create her own message. In the end, there just wasn't enough time. Okay, so while all that chaos is happening on the Democratic side, let's flip the coin and look at the Trump campaign. They were running a completely different playbook, one that just seemed to defy the normal laws of political gravity. So, what was driving him? The book reveals this really personal, almost existential motivation.
Trump himself told one of the authors point blank that he had to win because if he lost, his life was not going to be pleasant. This wasn't just politics for him. The book makes it clear this was a fight for his own survival. And this table here, it just lays out the stark differences between the two campaigns so clearly. You see, the Democratic campaign was often reacting, bogged down by worries. The Trump campaign, on the other hand, was always on offense. They didn't just deal with crises, they used them, turning indictments and even assassination attempts into fuel for their base. It was all about constant motion and a relentless focus on the issues that fired up his voters.
And all of that led to a truly historic victory. Trump didn't just win, he became the first Republican to win the popular vote since way back in 2004. And he became only the second president in all of U.S. history to be elected to a non-consecutive term.
So, what's the takeaway from this incredible comeback? Well, the book 2024 ends with a pretty chilling assessment that Trump would be returning to the White House vindicated, emboldened, unrestrained, and burning for revenge.
And all of this leaves us with one big, lingering question. This book, like all good political reporting, is what we call the first draft of history. But as that history gets written, what lessons will future campaigns, and really the entire country, take away from the wild, unprecedented election of 2024?